It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. This is number 226, and it's going to be a little bit different today because we are going to skip our Investing Skeptically segment. We have an interview with Benita Malone, and she is involved with humanism, American Humanists, and the Humanists of Houston, and her house is in Houston on the west side, and she is about to get flooded. And she contacted me and said, can we do an appeal to raise money for people in need? So we're going to have that coming up in just a few seconds. And, of course, right after that, we're going to talk to another Texas native, Alix Jules, and find out what's going on in his world and what he's up to. So I'm going to keep this intro part really short, and then we'll go right into the interview with Benita, and then we'll follow that up with the interview with Alix. We kind of have a last-minute addition to the show here, and I think it's really important. I have on the line Benita Malone. How are you, Benita?
I'm great, thank you. I'm one of the lucky ones.
You are indeed, and for my listeners who, of course, weren't listening to pre-show stuff where we were getting ready, you live in the Houston, Texas area.
Yes, I am. There's the inner loop of 610 and the outer loop of Beltway 8, and then there's the new Grand Parkway of 99. All three of those interstates circle Houston, and I am just barely inside Beltway 8.
Well, so, I just pulled up a map, and so I happen to know I don't want to get too specific, but you are on the west side, and you're not too far from what they call, because I don't know what else to correct me here, the Buffalo Bayou. Does that sound right?
Exactly. I'm within a mile of the Buffalo Bayou, where it is by Beltway 8 and I-10.
And right now, your house is dry.
I am. I had a little bit of leakage from the roof, but that settled down once the real heavy rains receded, and I didn't have any major damage to my house. And I've had power the whole time.
Well, that is nice. I'm looking at a map, so forgive me if I do this wrong, because I'm just going to read what Google Map has. Directly west of you, I guess this is 5, 6, 7 miles, is the George Bush Eldridge Reservoir?
Yes.
So George Bush could screw you again, huh?
It's actually a real huge park that's thriving with soccer games and hiking trails and tennis and all kinds of activities. It's a wonderful resource for our city, but it does fill up as it's designed to do when it rains. It
looks like it might be east to west as big as 4 miles and north to south as big as 5 miles with a couple roads and stuff in it. But it is a massive size, and I was watching the news last night. There's concern that it might overtop, or they might start releasing some of the water, and that water will head right towards you.
Exactly, and actually both have already happened. They're doing controlled releases to try and prevent it from going over the top, and there also has been some spillage around at the edges, but right now there's no structural concern about the dam. It's all just they're not worried about the levee collapsing or anything. It's just the water has to go somewhere, and they're doing their best to control the flow, but they're limited.
These were put in a long time ago, and they've never become totally and completely full before. Is that right?
Yeah. And I heard something on the news that they were built in the 1930s. They're about 70 years old.
I had heard that as well. And just by the way, that's almost 90 years old. See how time flies when we age. It's freaky. But the other one is the Bear Creek Reserve, or Bear Creek, reservoir. And that one started filling up a nearby neighborhood yesterday. I was watching on the news. But you're not right next to it, but maybe 5-6 miles away?
Right. But, we do have I have a lot of friends and family that have been in that area and are evacuated. The president of Humanists of Houston, Debbie, has evacuated from her home, and she lives in Sugar Land. And the best estimates they're saying now is that maybe she'll get 3 feet of water in her home.
Yeah, no, I had actually just read her post right before I called you this morning, and noticed that, and actually sent her a message because she said her family was going to go up to Chicago. But
right now, the freeways are closed.
Oh, geez.
So, they're telling people to evacuate, and people are asking, why aren't people leaving? Our evacuation routes are covered in water. And we have people that live in an emergency evacuation zone that have, a mandatory evacuation zone that have tried to leave and been turned back. In fact, Noelle George, who is with Foundation Beyond Belief, is in that situation with her family now.
Oh, my goodness. And so you had also told me that where you live now, the road out of your community is underwater.
Yes.
And how high is your house above that water now?
Well, I don't know the exact elevation of my house, and I'm not in any immediate danger, but the beltway that I'm right off the beltway. So there's my house, the feeder road, and then the beltway. And the beltway is lower, and the beltway is completely full right now with water. It's surreal because I sleep with the hum of traffic every night, and now it's eerily quiet because there's nobody obviously driving on there. And
without getting too specific, it looks like the road that is nearest to you that you would exit your neighborhood to is actually even lower than the beltway.
Yeah. And so far, it's really hard for me to get a picture of what's been happening because they haven't been able to fly the drones to get good aerial pictures because it's been raining and cloudy. And I'm hoping that today we'll get a better picture of what's going on. And the news sources are not always, there's so much news and you don't know where to look to get accurate news. And I'm so close to it here and I can't leave my house, so I don't know the bigger picture a lot of the time. No. So it's been a real struggle to get accurate
hopefully
news.
Do you have running water? Is it safe?
Yeah, it's safe. That hasn't been a problem, which really kind of surprises me.
I'm surprised myself, but you have water, and hopefully you have at least something that you can eat, and you have electricity.
Yeah. I'm good. I haven't left my house for 5 days, and I'm probably good here for another, I'm not going to run out of food anytime soon. And grocery stores are starting to open, and I have heard that they're able to restock their shelves. Most grocery stores got wiped out like I've never seen before, where even the tuna and, all the canned goods were gone and the chips were gone. And
I know I wouldn't eat it unless I was really, really hungry, but it does last. But right now you can't even leave your neighborhood.
No. Well, no, I can't. And then there's always the danger that if I leave, I won't be able to get back in.
Yeah. And then suddenly you're homeless and living in a shelter.
Yeah. And there's there's new shelters being opened up almost every day because the ones that they have open are reaching capacity. And the other problem is the people that need shelter can't get to, they have to keep opening them up in the areas where the people need them.
Now, I was watching some of the news, and they're hoping that some areas might start to improve as the rain has stopped in your area, but some areas, and it's going to be along the Buffalo Bayou area, directly west of Houston, if those reservoirs are doing controlled release or worse, there is a chance that the water can't move down fast enough, and it's going to go into the neighborhoods north and south of that bayou. Does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right. And yeah, that's what we're concerned about. And the other issue is that the water is going to be high for a very long time. Yeah. There's been so much water. I mean, we're really looking forward to the crest that may happen in 1 or 2 days, but then it is going to go slowly down, and it'll take months.
Well, I've only had ever in my basement, a couple of inches of water, and it's messy and it's dirty, and people who've lived through floods know that it's not just water, it's everything that's in the water. And almost everything it touches gets ruined, especially if it stays in water for a day or two, because then it gets mold, and you'll have people with giant piles out in front of their house. Of course, if it stays in your house for longer. And one of the reasons you reached out to me, not only just because we're friends, but I have a voice, and I don't mean me personally, but my show has listeners, and it struck me because I was sitting here thinking to myself, what can I do to help? Where do I go? What do I do? How do I donate money? And you actually had a suggestion that I could share with my listeners. So why don't you tell us about that and how my listeners can donate and help out?
Okay, I really appreciate that. I am the vice president of the Humanists of Houston, which is an affiliate of the American Humanist Association here in Houston. And we as a board have decided that we are going to be collecting donations expressly to help the members of our community that have been affected. And that includes, we have an executive board of 5 members, and 3 of those members have had their homes directly impacted. And we have a wider community of over 3,000 members on Meetup that live all around this city. And I can imagine that there are, hundreds more that are going to be in need. So we are putting in place a mechanism where you can donate to Humanists of Houston through our website, which is humanistofhouston.org. And we're also going to be putting an Amazon wish list together. That's going to take maybe a day or so to get that. And then you can actually purchase items off the wish list and have it sent to us at Humanists of Houston, and we'll distribute the items to people in need. But mostly what we need is we don't know what we are going to need, and we're going to need a lot even down the road.
Right.
So we're looking at things like people need transportation. We want to get gift cards for Uber and bus passes and cleaning supplies and all of that kind of stuff.
It's hard to know in advance what you need, and we don't want people sending you boxes of clothes that they refuse to wear anymore because they may not fit anybody, or just,
yeah.
I just went to your website myself, and of course, like you said, it's humanistsofhouston.org, and of course, if you just Google it, at least for me, it came up #1 hit, and I've never been to the website before, so it's likely other people will find it. And there's some menu items, and one of them is donate. And if you click on that, it says ways to donate and gives you all kinds of information. Near the top right now, it says make a donation, and you were telling me that they're currently in process of adding a special button just for this?
Yes.
And do we know exactly what that button will say yet?
Probably Harvey. or Harvey
Flood
donations
relief
or whatever.
All right, so
I'm not sure.
Yep. So listeners, what I want to do is we don't want to wait to have this show go out. So it's going to go out a little early compared to my last show. It's going to be less than a week. If the button for Harvey or if the button for flood relief or whatever they decide to call it is not there, you can still click on the Make a Donation button. And Benita, you're going to promise me, right? Anything that you guys get in is going to go help people, not just fill your coffers for the club, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And any thing that we get is going to go directly to our community.
Excellent. So listeners, we've talked about this before, and we want to raise some money. And so, Benita, what I'm going to do to help you get started is I personally am going to make a donation for $1,000.
That's incredibly generous. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And we're going to ask the listeners to try to match that and more. This time, it's not a match for me. You don't have to get $1,000 for me to give. This is urgent. I'm just going to send it today. But listeners, go to Humanists of Houston. You've been looking for a way to help. Your house is dry. I mean, Benita, yours is too, but I'm talking about the listeners. I mean, I have listeners in the Houston area, and maybe some of them are suffering, but most of my listeners around the country and even in other countries, if you're dry and you're cool and you have air conditioning and electricity and you can charge your phones and you're not in a shelter, give some money. I mean, there's people here in real serious need. Don't eat out once, get generics for your groceries. Do whatever you got to do, but give $5, $10, $20, give a couple $100. And if you happen to have some resources and some funds, give $1,000 or more. People are in desperate need. And Benita, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this little segment up?
Just that I'm a little bit emotional because we have experienced a lot of generosity here in Houston already, and it is so gratifying to be connected in this. You really feel like you're part of a greater community when these things come in, and we're just so grateful, and we really feel like this is an opportunity for the humanists of Houston to significantly help other humanists and other non-religious marginalized groups that we are connected with, and that's so important. And I really appreciate your willingness to put me on the air and do this call out, and I'm just so overwhelmed.
Well,
thank you.
We're all doing our little part, and this is my little part for now, at least. I kind of wish I could come down and help, but I don't know what I would do, and then I'm not running my business, so it gets tricky. I mean,
we've talked about working something with Foundation Beyond Belief. They have disaster relief teams, and I know that I mentioned Noelle's house is in critical danger right now, so I don't know how long it'll take for them to get up and running. But if people are interested in coming, I would encourage them to check into Foundation Beyond Belief and see if they can help their disaster relief teams.
I like it because I'm not a big fan of people just randomly showing up, especially, I'm very far away, but anyway, Benita, please keep us posted how it's going. Maybe in a few weeks you can come back and tell us how wonderful everything is.
I would love that.
And fingers crossed your house stays dry. But until then, be safe, and thank you for doing what you do. And
thank you, Phil.
We do not accept that there is a God or gods, personal or in nature, manifesting himself, herself, itself, or themselves in any way. We do not accept the idea of heaven, hell, perdition, purgatory, or any other of the stages reached by escalator going either up or down. We do not accept that there is any life after death. We do not accept miracles. We do not accept the idea of angels, spooks, goblins, gremlins, leprechauns, elves, or souls. We simply do not accept that anyone at any time was ever a prophet of God who did not exist or which did not exist. We do not accept any so-called holy books as guides to life, and that includes the Bible, the Torah, the Veda, the Koran, the Upanishads, the Awaspi, they invent them constantly. We don't care whether that book was written by anyone in history, in any age in history, whether that was written by Moses, Mary Baker Eddy, Paul, Joseph Smith, Mohammed, Gautama Buddha, or the fickle finger of fate.
With me today, I have my longtime friend, Alix Jules. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful, Phil. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, I know you brought a whole bunch of skits you want to do, right?
Sure. We want to start with a haiku. We could do haikus. Start off with, there once was a president that liked white nationalists. No, that
once was a president from Nantucket. No. Yeah, boy. That's good fun. Before we get into Trump fun, which would be great, why don't we just kind of go over, or you, more importantly, a little bit about your background and how you became an activist? How
I became Alix Jules?
Yeah.
Well, about 40 some odd years ago. No.
You were born a young black child.
I was. I actually wasn't born here. I was born. I was an early baby. My mom was in Haiti at the time. She's Haitian. I'm from Haitian descent. And I decided that I was going to pop early. And I was born over there. And then 28 days later, I'm in New York City and on my own, just immediately on my own.
Yeah, and running for president.
I raised myself.
Yeah, so you're foreign born, so you can't run for president, right? Is that how that
correct.
works?
That's correct. Cannot run for presidency. However, I mean, I grew up in New York in a very religious family. Super uber religious. I grew up in Brooklyn, where everyone was really religious in the black neighborhoods that I ran in, and there was no idea of secularism at all, none.
So when you say religious, what are we talking about? Southern Baptist,
Catholic.
Oh,
Catholic.
I'm so
yeah,
sorry. I'm not sure which is worse, but so now are you culturally Catholic?
No, I'm culturally atheist.
So none of it's stuck. You don't have the ceremonies or anything like that left over.
No, I got nothing. I've got nothing. And sometimes it kind of sucks because I have children, and when we're trying to celebrate more things, it gets a little hard because you don't have that many. So we try and pull in as many humanist rituals, if you want to call them rituals, that we can do.
Well, you could celebrate the birthday of Robert E. Lee. That's coming up, isn't it?
Oh.
So you're in New York, you're grown up Catholic, and apparently that didn't stick. What happened?
It didn't stick. I really was. My mom sent me to a Catholic school where originally she was like, hey, let's do Catholic school. And then she was like, let's not do Catholic school. So she sent me to a Seventh-day Adventist school when I was really young.
That's different.
That is different. And her entire reasoning was that there wasn't enough rigor around Catholicism. And so she's like, you're going to know the Bible. You're going to be a just man. You're going to understand it. You're going to live the life. And it's actually kind of interesting because from as young as I can remember, I always wanted to be a priest, to the point where I eventually got into seminary, by the way. But I wanted to be a priest. But she sent me to a Seventh-day Adventist school where I was exposed to a lot of interesting ideology, including one.
Oh, I forgot that you left the Catholic Church, because when you say exposed. Anyway, go ahead. You're at the school.
So I'm at the school, and it's kind of a problem, because if you understand the SDA ideology, there's this idea or the sentiment that the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon. So I am continuously picked on because everyone knows I'm a Catholic, and the only reason I'm there is because my mom knows someone and she wanted the best school and she wanted this wonderful, great rigor. And I mean, I was picked on for years. It's probably why I look like I do now. No. But I was picked on. And then eventually there were enough issues where my mom decided to pull me out of the SDA school and stuck me in a Lutheran school.
Now, how long were you in the Catholic school? Or I'm sorry, the Seventh-day Adventist school.
Seventh day, I want to say from about kindergarten, first grade up until about almost all of elementary school. Okay. So I was there. I was in. I remember you had to memorize 100 verses a year, things like that. I mean, it was pretty intense.
And then you said Lutheran. What kind of Lutheran?
It was, I don't remember which side it was on, but it was Lutheran school. It was I remember the school. It was St. Mark's Lutheran School actually it's Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, where again 99% of the students were black, and we had a couple of white teachers. But that was it, and I did that until the 8th grade, where I left Brooklyn to go to the Bronx, where I saw what was then the great American experiment, where I saw real diversity, where I saw people that didn't look like me, who didn't think like me, who didn't believe what I did, where I was now a real minority. 13%, I think, was about 11% the year that I went into that school. And that's where I got real exposure to different religions, which is odd, because where I went to church was right next to a Hasidic population in Brooklyn. It was Nostrand Avenue in church. So right there is one of the largest populations of rabbinical Jews there. It's just there. But we kind of lived next to each other, not with each other, etc. So I went to high school, and ta-da.
Now, was it a public high school?
It was a public high school.
It was interesting when you're talking about diversity. I'm thinking of my new hometown is New Lenox, a far southwest suburb of Chicago, the Bible Belt of Chicago. And for diversity, for black Americans, I think it's about 20 people.
It's 20 people, not 20%.
Yeah,
20 people.
20 people, at least I've been told that there's 20.
Have you met them all?
I haven't met a single one. As a matter of fact, I saw a couple of people who might look like they're Hispanic or Mexican or something, but my little town here is so white, it's actually really kind of bumming me out. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but this is the neighborhood. This is one of the towns that everyone that's in the south or west suburbs that is apparently a little bothered by diversity and has money moves here.
Yeah.
And I just moved here because all of my wife's family is in this area, and I'm in a little bit of a shock. But we have nearby towns we can go to, so it's not horrible. But so you had this big variety. You had Catholicism at home. You had Seventh-day Adventist for a while. You had some kind of Lutheranism, and then you had a secular high school, and then you enrolled in seminary school. Well,
not before I went to Islam. I mean, I could not.
You couldn't skip Islam. I mean,
you can't skip Islam. No. In high school was where, I mean, I was one of those guys that would argue about religion all the time. I actually had 2 versions of the Bible in my backpack, and I was ready to throw down with people until I really started getting into real theology. I mean, there's only so much that you can know even at that age. And I eventually put my Bible away for a while, dealing with real theological issues like the problem of evil, etc. And I put it away and decided that I was going to try and listen more. And that listening created a lot of questions for me. that was my real introduction to critical thought and really beginning to dissect these ideas and these ideologies. I got to a point where I was really questioning a lot. And for someone like me who, religion was part of identity,
right.
I could not extricate myself from race and religion. So I had to believe something. So why not go on to the next progression? And in the African American community, in the Black community, you have Islam there. It's an option. It's available to you. Sometimes it's not the best option, but it is there. And so I had to, I guess it was my junior year or so, I decided that I was going to try Islam on for size. I was in and out of different mosques and asking questions for a couple of weeks out of the year. Actually, it was a couple of weeks out of the year. I was living with a Muslim family and really throwing myself into it because a lot of the questions that I had, my Jewish friends couldn't answer it. My Christian friends couldn't answer it. My Catholic priest who saw all of this happening, he didn't have answers. And he actually was very supportive. Go ahead, go try that. See if you can get your answers that way. And I'll be waiting for you. I'll always be here to help. And I finally got through that process of Islam because it really was a process for me. And I said, what? I believe I'm still a believer, but this doesn't offer me any additional insight into who I am, what God is, and all the other issues, theological issues, questions that I had, they weren't working. Now, my parents, my mom and my grandmother, they were actually semi-supportive because at least I still believed in something, in someone, in something bigger. So it's okay. And it was about senior year or so. I decided, hey, you know what? Let's can I go back and throw myself into Catholicism? Maybe I didn't study hard enough
as a kid. Yeah, you missed it.
Right, totally. Maybe it was my exposure to all the other religions, and I just needed to throw myself into Catholicism a little bit deeper. Now, I have this interesting relationship with the priesthood because they were amazing people in my area, in Brooklyn. They were going out there. They weren't healing the sick, but they were feeding the hungry. If you felt down, they were bringing you up. And when you saw sorrow, when you saw anger, hostility, etc., these supermen put on a collar, went out there and made people feel good. If we're dealing with refugees coming from various countries, islands, etc., they were there to help feed and organize, etc. So that was something very personal to me, and I always wanted to do something like that. And it wasn't until much, much later that I realized that, you could do all of that without a collar.
No way.
Totally.
So you're saying Islam didn't have the answers either, huh?
Yeah. No, it really didn't.
Well, you still have about 29,996 other religions to try. Why haven't you tried all of them? Because
I eventually got to the point where I just moved into the spiritual but not religious realm.
Ah, yeah, and the gateway drug to atheism.
Gateway drug. And even when I looked back, I would say that I was able to discount all of the other religions because of their really, odd ideas of what God and religion were. Because transubstantiation, I mean, that's completely normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you finally got to the spiritual route, and when did you start using the A word?
September 12th. It was one day after the September 11th.
Oh, that's September 12th.
Yeah, that's September 12th. My big thing was, I knew that I was an atheist, but I was afraid of using it. I had moved away from the church. This is, I'm in my 20s at this point. Moved away from the church. My mom knew that I was no longer religious and had started to create a lot of tension between us. And we had been really close for a very long time. But September 12th, actually September 11th, I felt it. I was in Texas, and I said, you know what, I need to get home really, really quickly. And Texas was my home at the time, but, my entire family was in New York, and couldn't get a hold of them, etc. I got on the plane, and I knew that when I got to New York, it was all completely done for me. I was walking up Church and Vesey. I went and saw people, and I saw their pain. I felt their pain to a lot of the extent, and I finally was able to find a couple of members of my family, not everybody, but dealing with that and seeing that, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm totally justified in using it, and I challenge anyone to challenge that label.
Well,
I was an atheist.
I'm all for it, and I even go a little further than maybe you do, and maybe you do this too. I call myself an evangelical atheist. And that opens a nice, fun conversation because, most people don't know the difference between evangelical and fundamentalist. So I'm not a fundamentalist atheist, but I am an evangelical atheist, which basically means I think I'm right and you should believe what I do. And so I go out and preach my gospel of rationalism and science and, correcting from your mistakes.
Would you consider yourself an anti-theist as well, or no?
Yeah, well, I think I'd be more comfortable with anti-theism, just because anti-theist sounds like I'm against theists, the people.
Okay.
And it's one of those things. I had years ago, I was going to debate a preacher on the campus of the University of Illinois, and it just never worked out. But at one point, we were talking back and forth on Facebook Messenger or something, and it says, "So you wanna kill all religious people?" I'm like, okay, you know what? We cannot proceed. That's a non-starter, dude. You can't just say something like that. That's completely untrue. And he goes, "So that's not your position?" And I said, "No, I want every religious person to be free from religion, but I don't want them to gain that freedom by losing their life. I want them to be able to enjoy their life without religion." And he's like, "Oh, I guess I misunderstood." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so, because there is other ways." But he saw being Christian was being alive, kind of thing. So you've been in activism now for a few years, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've done and where you've spoken, and maybe what's coming up?
Oh my goodness, where have I spoken? I originally started, my activism was very much based on increasing diversity, or the conversation around diversity in the atheist movement, and then also going into minority communities and showing them, hey, guess what? We exist. You can be black and an atheist at the same time. Imagine that. And there's been a constant history of us always existing. We've been here. We've done that. And that generated, several, ripples in not only the blogosphere and media. And I think the very first thing that really put me on the quote unquote map was an article that featured me in Ebony magazine. And in that one, I was able to really begin to have a lot of discourse in the black community specifically about, hey, this guy says he's an atheist. Can I be one too? Or that's the word that I use, and they've been demystifying and getting rid of the taboo around it. And we see this wonderful burgeoning number of black atheists out there, especially in the U.S. And I really was focused on that, and then secular parenting, etc. But recently, it's been one about discussing this phenomenon of color blindness and how do you really focus on race when you're parenting. A lot of new humanist parents, they have this idea of I want to make sure that I raise children that are not going to be part of the problem. How do I do that? And so a lot of my speaking tends to focus on that and rationally talking about race, because it's very easy to go, I don't say that the centrist idea or the centrist position is the best position. Trying to be non-emotional but empathetic at the same time, rationally speaking on the topic, using data, but again, coming back to empathy, centering around empathy is a great way of being able to have conversations on either side. And I've spoken, I was recently at the Gateway to Reason. Prior to that, I was actually on tour for earlier on this year, and I did interestingly enough, the Carolinas and into Virginia, several stops along the way, talking about race, policing, etc. So I've been around for a little bit now. What got me really into the whole I got to talk about identity was what was going on with my son, who was a black atheist as well. I mean, he's always known that he's a black atheist, and he was picked on in school because of it. We were bringing Camp Quest to Texas, and it was great. It was wonderful. A couple of months after the event, and he happened to be featured on the news, but a couple of months after the event, we found out that the churches, or some of the churches, were using that film footage for recruiting purposes because the atheists are coming after you. And that just wasn't okay. And some kids, roughed them up. And I wanted to get really upset at those kids and the parents, et cetera. But I realized at the time, is it really 100% their fault? What's the narrative that they're being fed? And what am I going to do to change it? So it was right about then I said, I need to be much more active, much more vocal, get out there, hold as many banners, have as many conversations as I can, not just in the atheist movement, but in my other communities and as many people that will have the conversation.
Are you going to be at the American Atheist Conference?
Well, we initially had plans to go there. Mandisa is going to be there. Mandisa from Black Nonbelievers is going to be there. But given the current air of racial tension, my wife's asked me not to go. So I will not be there. I'm going to miss it this year.
Yeah, I understand. And, of course, we're recording this just before I leave, and the listeners are going to hear it probably a week or two after it's over. And, and of course, I will tell them that it was wonderful, and we really missed you there. How's that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you get to see the eclipse? How's that sound?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. It was beautiful.
Do you have any events you're going to later in the year?
I will be at the Pennsylvania Atheist Conference, which is October 13th or so, and that's the big Margaret Downey event, and there's going to be just wonderful. Victor Harris is going to be there. Science Babe is going to be there, etc. It looks like a very diverse set of people that are going to be there. I think Lawrence Krauss is going to be there as well. But I'm looking very much to that event at the end of the year. Yeah.
Now, some of my listeners will know that you were a regular guest, I guess. Is that the correct word? Co-host with David Smalley on Dogma Debate.
Yeah, guest host. I went by it was AL, all about IX, the Alix, and I was the funny one and the smart one, which was kind of tough for David sometimes, but yeah.
And weren't you also the how should I say this, the tall one?
That's not hard. But yes, also I was. Oh wait, I was tall, dark, and handsome. How's that?
There you go. And of course, David
at 5'7". At 5'7", I am tall, dark, and handsome.
David moved to California and left you out to dry back in Texas. Any thoughts on doing your own podcast?
A lot. There might be some news in the next couple of months, actually, next couple of weeks, that I'm hoping that it becomes reality. I've been around talking to people. I've been on other podcasts, et cetera. So yeah, I got the itch. I didn't have one before, but I got the itch. Well, and no matter how many sprays I've used, it won't go away.
Well, that's because your skin's just getting too dry. You need some cocoa butter or something. But yeah, I was doing the Googling to see what you've been doing lately, and you've been on lots of podcasts and written some guest pieces for big blogs. And I guess technically you have a blog?
I do still occasionally write on the graffiti wall on Pathos, and I also have one on the Orbit. And it's just been so ridiculously, the podcast and traveling, touring I know I could reach more people if I just write more, but you know what? I love having conversations with people. I absolutely love it.
Well, it's one of those things that I noticed years ago. A lot of people in the secular movement either are young enough they don't have kids yet, or they're old enough that the kids have moved out. Because having kids takes a lot of your time.
Yeah, and I got a lot of them.
How many kids do you have?
A total of 5.
Okay. I was going to say like 18 or something.
No. You know what? Two can be a handful.
I know that.
You go from you go from man-to-man coverage when you got 2. Once you got 3, it's zone defense.
Yeah.
So, when you get to 5, but I mean, 2 of them are, older than 18 and they're out of the house. So it's really just the 3, which 3, 6, and 11.
Well, when they're those ages, you always got to be wondering about the one that's quiet.
I don't have one of those.
No. I mean, like just during the day, all of a sudden they're like, the kids are all really quiet right now. What are they doing?
An alarm is usually going off if they get to like not the alarms in the back of my head. No, literally, there's an alarm that's off.
Well, I mean, my kids are like 20 and a half and 22 and a half or something like that. And, they're having a great time living the adventure of life. And like many people their age, they want to be responsible and do everything, as they call it, adulting. Now, the other thing I bugged you on pre-show is are you going to write a book? Can I talk you into it?
I'm actually thinking about it. I'm working on one concept where, over the last year or so, I live in Texas. I just actually, a little bit northeast of Dallas, where I get a kind of a mix between, it's really interesting, a mix between conservatives and liberals and et cetera. And occasionally you just don't know which one you're going to run into. And so I have this beautiful Starbucks up the street. And although I live in a diverse area with tons of liberals and independents, et cetera, I overhear the most fascinating, super ultra conservative conversations at my Starbucks. And so I'm actually thinking about writing one on everything that I've learned from listening to the other side at this Starbucks. So that may actually be my first one. So I'm thinking about it.
Well, that sounds fun. Well, keep us posted on the podcast. And if you need any suggestions about equipment to buy, of course, I'm happy to help. And one thing I know a lot of new podcasters do is they buy too good of a microphone. So don't do that. Don't buy a $600 microphone.
Okay. I will not do that.
Actually, whatever it is you're using now sounds fantastic. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
I will keep using that.
And how can people follow, find, or communicate with you if they have questions and maybe they want to email you or something?
Sure. You can always find me on Facebook. It's Alix, Alix Jules, and you can. I'm usually tapped out with friends. You can follow. Most of my stuff is public. There's also a public page as well. You can find me also on the graffiti wall. Just it's on Pathos is the graffiti wall. Same thing with the Orbit. Just Alix Jules on the Orbit. On Twitter, it's Alix331. And let's see, email, probably the best one is my wonderful Gmail account, and it's just alex.jules@gmail.com.
So Alix, Alix, and what's the last name spelling again?
Jules.
Jules at gmail.com. So if you have any questions for Alix, or if you're putting together a conference or want him to come speak to your group or something like that, give him a contact. And Alix, I appreciate you being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Maybe we could do this again sometime.
Hey, thanks.
We do not accept that there is now or has ever been a holy person, and that includes everyone from Mother Teresa to Moses to Jesus Christ. We call him JC. Mohammed, his daughter Fatima, the angel Moroni, the Pope, any Pope, all of the popes, any oracles, self-appointed or appointed by other persons, or elected by strange men in long red dresses. We We do not accept that there is any efficacy in prayer. And we don't care whether they're said by your legislator, George Bush, yourself, myself, a priest, a rabbi, a minister, a guru, or even your mama. Atheists see all of this, first, as being totally subjective and going on only in your little heads, nowhere else. And secondly, we see it basically as simply being silly. We don't hate you. We think you're quite odd. But these are all very ancient, outmoded fables, and we no longer need to cling to them in our modern world. The most difficult thing in the world to do is to live in it. Just to get along with other people, to earn a living, to meet our basic needs. And we do not need encumbered by all of these ideas which bring you a sense of guilt, a sense of inadequacy, of impotence. We need a decent, modern, sophisticated, workable set of standards by which we can get along with ourselves and others.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Once again, everybody, thank you for listening. If you did not get the web address for donating money, it's humanistsofhouston.org, all one word, of course, or you can just Google Humanists of Houston. If you go to the page and click on the donate link, if you do it right away, right as soon as this show comes out, you'll see a make a donation button. You can give there. Hopefully soon their website will be tweaked and have something specific to Hurricane Harvey, and you can donate with that button. But in either case, the money's going to go to help other humanists, atheist freethinkers, people in the Houston area. So not only are you making a difference, you're making a difference specifically that is geared to helping secular individuals. So we do appreciate that in advance. A couple of other things on iTunes, 3 quick reviews here. One by B. Lugosi. I'm assuming that's the Dracula reference. Very clever. I would have never thought the format of the podcast would work or even be interesting. It's nice to be proven so very wrong. Great content and engaging guests such as Andrew Torres, Alex J. O'Connor, and many more. Learning while being entertained is great fun. I'm hooked. Well, thank you very much for that kind review. Another review, oh gosh, I don't know how to say this. Neuromicron. They were going to go with that. Phil gives great explanations of various financial and atheist topics. I've managed to go through every episode. Plan to go through them all a second time just to listen to the financial parts. Yes, they are that good. Highly recommend this show. It's fantastic. Damn, you guys are way too nice to me. And another one real short, From Halo to God. This is one of my favorite shows, another 5-star review. So out of the 120 plus reviews, 117 are 5 stars. So thank you very much. Please go give a review on either iTunes or Stitcher. Yes, Stitcher. The show is hosted on Spreaker, but I'm not aware that they have a place to review shows there. So please go give a review. Share with your friends. I'm very honored and flattered every time I meet somebody that says that they listen to the show and that they like it, especially if they like it. Every once in a while someone doesn't, but you can't make everybody happy. So once again, thank you for listening. I'm just going to go ahead and sign off and remind you one last time to donate some money to help people that have been flooded out of their houses. And I hope to see you somewhere soon. Until then, ciao.